Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Weil. This is the weekly Jupyter Front Ends meeting for Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. Thank you so much for joining us. We have, looks like 8 people, including myself, on the call. We have an agenda with a couple of items on it. Please add more items if you are interested in discussing something on the record with us today. Looks like Andrew is first up. Go ahead, Andrew.
Hey everyone. Hello. So my name is Andrew, and yeah, I wanted to say that we just released Jupyter Scheduler 2.8.0 that now works with Jupyter collaboration. Yeah, thanks everyone, especially Martin, who helped me figure it out. Yeah. So
For those who are unfamiliar, Andrew, would you like to give a pitch for what Jupyter Scheduler is?
Yeah, sure. So in JupyterLab we have, or in Jupyter Notebook we have perfect perfect file format for scientific computing, which is a notebook, right? So sometimes you would like to run your notebooks without like pressing run a cell or run a notebook by hand, right? So Jupyter Scheduler allows you to run notebooks, including running on schedule. We're also working on adding workflows now. And back to my initial point, so now you can use that extension in Jupyter with real-time collaboration mode enabled. To do that, you need to install Jupyter collaboration extension and Jupyter scheduler extension. Yep, that's it. Please find links in the chat. Thank you.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Andrew, um, for updating Jupyter Scheduler. Please check it out. How does Jupyter Scheduler compare to Papermill? Well, Jupyter Scheduler includes a scheduling component. So it works similarly to Papermill in that it runs notebooks unattended, and you can also include parameters when you run it. We use Papermill as kind of inspiration for that, but I don't think Papermill has a scheduling component where it can just like run at the same time every day, for example.
Also, we have like a nice UI, front end, backend components. So JupyterLab extension for UI, Jupyter server component for server. You can check out the GitHub if you would like to. It has links to documentation with screenshots. You could also just quickly install it with pip install Jupyter Scheduler.
Yeah. And for the sake of the recording, Mike is mentioning in the chat that you can, in fact, use Jupyter Scheduler to run Papermill. One of the features of it is that you can swap in an alternate engine to run jobs. So some people are already doing that, and they're running custom classes to run notebooks in a particular way for them. So that's really cool. I didn't know about this Argo Jupyter Scheduler package. That's really neat.
We do that on the Barry, and it's been a very pleasant experience. And thank you for designing scheduler in a way which is extensible itself.
Yep,
that's really cool.
So also you could potentially, like take a backend, host it in the cloud, and do stuff with it.
It's also a little bit. It's great to hear that it supports RTC now and handles the RTC prefix. I've had a couple of extensions where I had to do some special code to handle this prefix tool. But the timing is funny because David just opened a pull request to remove that prefix and remove the need for that in the first place. I'm linking this pull request in chat. I think it's possibly not ready for discussion on this call because it's just freshly opened in a draft. But I think this is like a very exciting change that is relevant to the point that you mentioned.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So also wanted to say that we could definitely use like testing with RTC, so to speak, support. Me and a couple of other people verified all the key user flows for Jupyter Scheduler with RTC, and everything seems fine. But maybe we have not seen something. So if you would like to use it, try to using it with RTC, and like let us know if something goes wrong through issues. That definitely would be very beneficial for us. For Jupyter Scheduler and for Jupyter Collaboration for RTC as well, I guess. So, yeah, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments about scheduler? I noticed we had a couple more people join. For anyone who joined in just the last few minutes, I just dropped another link to the agenda in if you want to sign in and add anything else you want to talk about on the record. I put myself on the agenda because one of my coworkers, a couple of my coworkers were asking about adding a tree view to core JupyterLab. They want something that works similarly to what some IDEs do, where the file browser displays folders as a kind of drop-down tree, so that you can expand them without navigating into the folder. I mean, many file browsers in you know, basic operating systems do this as well. I was surprised to see that this came up all the way back in October 2018, so almost 6 years ago. And there have been a few different extensions that have been developed since then. It looks like there's one called JupyterLab Unfold that has been updated fairly recently. I think, Mike, you've worked on that. But my colleagues are now asking, that's good, can we get Unfold in as like a core part of JupyterLab? And I had to be a bit more pragmatic about it. But I was also curious about what the community thought. Is this something that would be valuable? Does it add a lot of complexity? I don't have full context about kind of the background of Unfold and the status of it. So I was wondering if anyone had any comments about that.
So I guess I will go first. I would 100% support merging that into core. There is a couple of reasons. One is that this is an expected functionality for a file browser. The other is that each time there is a change which in the file browser, we need to update JupyterLab Unfold. And I basically waiting or working on getting this extension to work first thing every time, because it's so critical for my workflow.
Yep.
And having that tested in the core using Galata as we make changes to the other view, like the plain table view, would be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That said,
go ahead.
There are some issues with, like, this extension is not perfect because in core, the listing assumes that you see only one folder at a time. When you start editing files, like start renaming file, for example, you might get focused on the wrong file with the same name in a different folder, which needs a fix upstream in JupyterLab itself. But what I'm saying is, yes, I would like to see it merged into the core, but before we ship it, we might need to work a little bit on some internals to make sure that it is like ready to be considered, or rather released as an official Jupyter Lab component.
So I guess what is the good next step for that? Should I open an issue in JupyterLab, or should I repurpose the issue 5526 that I dropped in the chat to cover that?
I would suggest to open an issue in JupyterLab Unfold, just because there are other contributors and maintainers. I would
Got it.
mention Martin, who I believe wrote this extension initially, and they might have an opinion.
Mhm.
And then maybe link that from the issue that already exists on JupyterLab site.
Mhm. For the sake of the recording, Nick and Tony have been chatting about this in the Zoom chat. Having a general purpose tree grid viewer editor with rotatable columns rows would be fantastic. I am currently working on some file browser improvements. I'm changing it from using Flexbox to CSS grid, which Mike is very enthusiastic about, and which is causing all sorts of fun visual changes that are unintended. So I'm still working on that. Um, Tony also correctly points out that accessibility is a concern for this, that we need to make sure that tree grids, which don't have general support across user agents, are still going to be accessible for people using like screen readers or keyboard only. So, file browsers, people think that they know what a file browser should be. There's a lot of, and there's patent trash as well, and we don't want that. Yeah, we don't want to inadvertently clash with patented material about that.
So I think just to be
Good.
clear, what we are speaking of is an option to
Yeah.
display the file browser as a tree and not changing the default. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. I think, I like the idea of making it optional. Tony's saying the youth doesn't use file browsers as much either. I don't know. I haven't been youthful for a very long time. I can say that like in the kind of IDE of the moment, which I'm assuming is still visual code, the idea of jumping from file to file is more popular than going from than browsing through the code visually. So I think like browsing versus jumping, searching, that's been a debate for a very long time. I think there's a place for both. Sorry, Nick, what does Control T do? I'm assuming that's, I always parse that as going to a new tab.
Yeah, that's why we can't have it. If you do that in, I want to say Sublime had it, but then it's also in VS Code. It's a special case of the command palette that lets you jump to a file by name, or I think the default is to a symbol that's defined
Okay.
by. So
See,
yeah, anytime someone opens up a JupyterLab thing and starts like looking through the files, and there's like, don't do that, right?
Mhm.
There's 1,000 files. There's 4,000 files in there, right? You probably know what you want, except everything's called manager or index or whatever. But once you get out of that, right, the fuzzy search on that is enormous.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I really feel like Sublime Text moved the needle. That was the it file editor for a while. But now people just kind of expect that. Okay, well, there's a saying in ice hockey that you need to skate where the puck is going, not where it presently is. So this is a challenge of like our file browser certainly feels like it's less featureful than competitors are, but do we skate to where they are, or do we try to go where they will be? And then of course we have to try to predict where they will be. So I'll tell you what, regarding the JupyterLab Unfold, as an action item for this, I can merge this. I can open an issue to merge this into the core in JupyterLab Unfold. I'll take care of that when we're done here. Any other comments, questions, suggestions about this? Okay. Well, it looks like we don't have anything else in the on the record portion of the agenda. I will drop this in one more time here. And let's see. For now, these are blockers for 4.3. Okay. On that note, should we take a look at the 4.3 issues? Because I know 4.3 is still in beta. We're now in September. We want to try to get this thing released in September. So Mike, what do you think? Should we do this on the record, off the record? Should we end the recording and then move on to 4.3 stuff? Okay, oh, sorry, I missed that in the chat. I was waiting for you to say something. Okay, well, with that, I think we'll end the on the record portion. Thank you so much for joining us. We meet every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time.
Real fast
Yeah,
before
go
we get
ahead.
off the record.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought that these first meetings of the month were supposed to be accessibility related. So I keep coming to those, and this is like the second time that hasn't happened.
Really?
At least a while ago.
I'm so sorry. I must have missed that.
So my understanding of things, which sorry if I didn't communicate that well, was we were combining the two meetings officially. So accessibility can happen in any of the weekly meetings, but because we didn't want to add a ton of new meetings to the schedules of folks who were primarily interested in accessibility, the idea was that accessibility folks would make an effort to show up specifically for the first meeting of the month. So that could be like the ideal time to bring up any bigger accessibility topics. So if there's nothing to discuss this month, there's nothing to discuss. But if there's anything accessibility related to discuss, this is a particularly good time to do it. I see a lot of accessibility folks are here.
Yeah, thank you for joining. I do see also Andrea and Mike have their hands up. So I'm going to quickly jump over. Andrea, what would you like to say?
I just wanted to thank you, first of all. And second of all, Mike, I've looked into that PR 16744, and yeah, it would be perfectly compatible with the changes that I made on Jupyter scheduler side to make RTC work. So it uses like contents API, which is pretty smart, and it checks if it already has an RTC prefix. So your change would, this change, the change that you talked about would make the fix not necessary and would make this code a candidate for removal, but it would work seamlessly, and we don't have to worry about like pinning the version of JupyterLab not to have this fix, you know, it won't break anything. Super compatible. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, that's great to hear. So regarding the accessibility prioritization, my understanding from the conversation was that if there's anything on the agenda related to accessibility, it goes first, and other topics only come in if there is nothing accessibility related. And I basically agree with what Ellie said. I think that's what we might want to do is have some kind of a reminder. I'm not sure whether that should be an issue, comment, or a brief note in the Gitter channel that this to promote this meeting and say that folks interested in accessibility will be there, and just like trying to be forward looking and see how we can improve things. But yeah, I don't necessarily agree with the sentiment that it was supposed to be an accessibility meeting and it didn't happen. Well, for it to
Well,
happen,
it's
there
not
needs to
necessarily
be.
that, right? It's like when we made the decision, the discussion was that accessibility people would show up because it was really important to have accessibility here, right? And there
Yeah.
seemed to be a lot of fervor around that representation, and there seemed to be a lot of excitement. And as a neurodiverse person, I fucking believe that. So I've come
Yeah.
twice and I haven't seen it. And there are very muddled messages about accessibility in the project. And I was hoping that, maybe this month or next month, whatever, Andre. I was hoping that this month or next month, disabled folks and accessibility could be centered, but it hasn't. So it's just, really disappointing. And it feels like a lot of the transition from the weekly accessibility meetings to this meeting were performative, and I'm just not seeing the representation that disabled users deserve.
Okay.
So that's kind of my last piece here. I hope you guys can get some messages out over the coming months and like rally folks, but this is I was hoping for a little better.
Okay. I mean, I've shared the agenda to request that people put up topics to discuss. So if there aren't any topics, Tony, I can't concoct them out of thin air.
I'm not talking about the topics, Jason. I'm not talking about today. It's more that there was an agreement that when we gave up the accessibility meeting, that we would have at least some focus on accessibility.
Okay.
At least once. And this is about the people showing up. This is about the meeting quality and the agenda and the information that comes out ahead of time. It's not about the agenda. I was hoping that accessibility allies would be here, but I didn't necessarily see that, right? So it's just, and this isn't a one-off thing, right? So this is I haven't seen people rally around accessibility, and as a disability advocate, I do not think that we're supporting our disabled users in the way that we should, and that just disappoints me because I
So
put
I
in a lot
think-
of work ahead of time.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I mean, I'm looking at the calendar. So the next first Wednesday meeting would be October 2nd. But again, like we don't have to reserve that. I think if we want to prioritize it, that's good. Is there something that we can do to like invite to rally, to say like, hey, it's a new month. If you have accessibility topics, please join us at the Jupyter front ends meeting. Because you're right, we used to have a dedicated accessibility meeting, which was smaller than this group usually is, but it was laser focused on that. Now we don't. We merge that in with the understanding that, particularly in the first meeting every month, we prioritize it. But we haven't had accessibility stuff on the agenda today. I don't remember the one from early August. But is there something we can do to like spread the word about this? Because I did not know this, or I had forgotten about it. But is this something?
No, it felt reactionary when it happened. It felt like accessibility is important to the project, but we didn't have the resources to do it. And for the past 2 months, it feels like we definitely don't have the resources to do it. We changed the name of things, we rebranded stuff, and it's been a nominal thing. And I think that that's just the major concern that I have is that accessibility remains a nominal effort in Jupyter without really considering the representation of disabled users here, right? So I hope that maybe the executive council or somebody can consider this a little bit, but like having accessibility in the front end side of things right now feels really performative. We've basically at this point we've missed 2 meetings that we would have had with the community, and that would have been 4 meetings at least if we were still doing the accessibility calls. So it just seems like this is a little bit better for Jupyter's brand than it is for disabled folks, and I'm not all that cool with it.
Well, go ahead, Ely.
My memory is that we were really struggling to keep up attendance, and I think actually those accessibility meetings had been officially canceled before we did the merge into this meeting. The reason I was so motivated to push the merge of the 2 meetings was because I saw it as a way to keep a space alive for accessibility topics to happen so that there was less sort of logistical overhead and we weren't losing the regular meeting
Totally.
cadence altogether by
Totally.
having that particular meeting go away.
I hear you, Illy, and I think a lot of the challenge with the accessibility meeting was that we were kind of, we were running out of steam, we were running out of topics, and like we really weren't able to kind of support things. It wasn't necessarily about resources, it was kind of like a stalemate. We couldn't really kind of move forward. And part of the discussion was if we could involve the larger community in accessibility, maybe we can do some evangelization and make that happen, right? But to do that, that requires somebody to do the work, right? And like a lot of people have put in a lot of work, but right now it really is going to require somebody to do the work. And part of canceling the accessibility meetings was because the work was becoming overwhelming. So right now it just seems to me that there's nobody really resourced for accessibility. And part of the canceling the accessibility meetings was the lack of resources. So.
Mhm. Well, I hear you, and this is something that's very important for a lot of our users, especially because Jupyter is so, popularly used in education. We want to make sure that this is as accessible as possible for the sake of all potential users going forward. And I hear your frustration that there hasn't been like a concerted effort the last couple of first Wednesday meetings to get accessibility stuff prioritized and to stuff the agenda and the attendee list to have a particular emphasis on this. But Mike in the chat is saying encourage proposed solutions. I think getting the word out, certainly in advance of the meeting. So like, hey, if there's something that you want to talk about, like I put an agenda item that's not related to accessibility on because someone was talking about a topic that was important to them. And I said, hey, I don't have an answer for you, but I'd like to talk about it with the JupyterLab, front-end developers. I think we need to get a lot of Jupyter conversations in this meeting as well. We've had, talk about scheduler, talk about Jupyter AI from time to time, talk about Jupyter Lite and server. Well, not so much server because it's its own thing, but accessibility has a home here. And I want that to be meaningful. I don't want that to be just patronizing, like, we're saying it, but we're not doing anything. That I completely understand that sounds patronizing and not constructive to say that we care about it without doing anything about it. So
thank you for hearing me, Jason. I appreciate you.
Tony, like, I know this is very important to you and I want you to feel heard about this.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, I don't want this to become a game of like trying to, make anyone else feel like they're excluded or unheard or anything like that. Mike has his hand up though.
Yeah, so in addition to spreading the word, I wanted to call out something from the chat. Rosie proposed that maybe the HackMD template could be split into topics in the different categories to increase visibility and remind folks about the accessibility topics. And I think I agree. It's technically a little bit difficult because what happens usually we just copy and paste the template from the previous week. So making sure that it doesn't get lost. We can add a reminder at the top and hopefully that will work, but it's not a guarantee. Another idea that I wanted to add is we have an accessibility label on issues in JupyterLab. I think maybe in Notebook as well. And sometimes on these weekly meetings, we go over issues and share them, especially for releases. I think if there is nothing on the agenda for accessibility, we could always fall back to looking at these issues in different orders each week and cover, at least get some eyes on the issues that are already open and discuss them. This discussion might lead to someone picking up the issue or adding a comment, but basically it will ensure that things are moving forward at least in some way. I don't know if there are other proposals. I see that there's more comments coming in the chat.
Prioritizing triage would be a good start. It would be a good way to build general literacy across the devs, build some accessibility language. But that's a pretty good suggestion. It will require like will require accessibility folks to be here to be able to support that, right?
Yeah.
So there is some going to the community that's going to need to happen to make that work.
Yeah, I know Tony has, you've participated a bunch in issue triage on Tuesdays. We're still doing that. When we see issues come in that appear to be accessibility related, I try to tag things with the label accessibility. I can't guarantee that I have 100% hit rate, but I'm gonna pull that up just to see. We have a tag accessibility, which has 71 open issues, which I can drop in. So
Nice.
I don't know if you all want to take a look at that, but Andrew does have a hand raised. Andrew, you want to go ahead?
Oh yeah, I was just wanted to say that like we all evidently care a lot about project and its accessibility, and let's just like try to keep the meeting friendly and patient. And it's also important in terms of accessibility, right? Because what I mentioned, like some folks might have like non-physical disorders, right? So this might be very important for them. So yep, thank you.
Okay. I hear you about that. So, do we have any other questions, comments for the on the record portion? Because we usually do things like triage that are off the record, and we've got about 22 minutes left in the hour here. Okay. And Ely, did you drop that into the your proposal, which is generally pretty popular? Would you mind if I drop that into the agenda here about prioritizing accessibility in triage?
Oh, totally.
Happens-
Let me know if you need me to scare up any links or anything.
Oh,
There
well, I'm
was
going to
one on
drop it
the
in.
accessibility side and one on the front end side.
Okay, I'm going to drop it in directly attributed to you, but if you have any links that you want to add to that, please add to the agenda in the HackMD, just so that gets shared and saved.
Sure, totally.
Okay, thank
looks
you,
like
Ely.
it was Jeremy who threw it into the chat. Thank you, Jeremy.
Oh, yeah, and you added something. Oh, awesome. Yeah, thank you. Okay, with that in mind, I'll make one last call if anybody has any topics for on the record.
I wanted to continue that discussion regarding how to arrange the meetings to ensure that accessibility is covered. What I tried to do right now was to add 2 bullet points to the top of the agenda. I will share my screen. Just wanted to make sure that people are on board with this wording. Okay, Zoom is a little bit slow when I'm sharing my screen, but what I added is on every first meeting on calendar month, please add accessibility section to agenda. And if there's nothing in accessibility section, let's fall back to triaging, discussing issues with the tag accessibility team. Does it sound okay, or do we want to first discuss that offline, or is it okay to keep it like that? Okay, hearing none objections.
This seems like oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Seems like a good way to fill out the meeting. Seems like a good way to have a monthly triage. Seems like all positives.
All right, seeing a thumbs up from Ely as well. Thank you. Okay, Any other topics that people want to discuss on the record? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you all for joining, and thank you all for some great discussion here today. We'll continue with the triage off the record. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.